This video is a special request video that I was going to send privately to a very good friend of mine, but on second thought I decided just to go ahead and make it public because there may be others that are interested in this material, and it sort of expedites what it is I'm trying to do as far as just getting this information to my friend with the path of least resistance. I do want to call out first the change in my cue, because my friend had specifically asked me about my butt extension that I had on my cue the other day. So since we spoke, my extension that I had on the end of my cue failed me. The connector internally cracked a little bit, rendering it not usable. So I switched over to this midsection, which you'll notice, and I like it a lot. It offers a lot of durability and stability as far as being reliable and not having problems with this, or holding this in and torquing it a little bit. So I may end up with the midsection joint. I'm trying this one out and I like it a lot. If you're keeping up with pool lately, you're seeing that a lot of players are gravitating towards longer cues. Well, the answer to that, as far as what the benefits are, is twofold. Well, it's visual and it's physical. You don't hear much about the visual, but I'm going to speak about that, at least from my experience. Concerning the physical, I'm on a 10-foot table here, so if I have a shot like this with a 65-inch cue, I have no trouble comfortably reaching the shot. I love the way that everything feels when I set up with a longer cue. I feel more solid at the table, which translates into mental. In other words, a boost in confidence. So your mental game comes along with a strong visual, physical game. Now, as far as doing a quick contrast between what I did years ago and what I do now, I think this is pertinent to some degree. Years ago, I used to play with a 57-inch cue, 57.5-inch cue. I gravitated to the shorter cues because it actually helped me with overcome stroke errors, visual errors, because I would use a 6 or 8-inch bridge distance, and that would help me to approach shots with a decreased probability of error, as I saw it, and I think that it did. But with CTE, I actually learned how to access a known center cue ball, which means that my alignment had definition, and through repetition I was able to shoot a lot of shots from the correct alignment with the correct center cue ball, which in turn allowed me to straighten out my stroke as a result of a known center cue ball and a comfortable known alignment that I could depend on. You see, in the conventional pool world, we do things like this. We shoot the cue ball up and down the table using a known center cue ball to hit the diamond so that you can come back and hopefully hit your tip. You can develop a cookie cutter approach, nice clean lines, everything's repeatable. And then we set up, in the conventional world, we set up these straight-in shots and move the cue ball from location to location to location to location so that we can hopefully, purposefully develop a repeatable center cue ball alignment that will transfer to all shots. But see, there's a mistake there. You see, when you observe professional pool players playing, they're not going to be in that cookie cutter alignment that these drills offer. If you watch professional players play, just observe a little bit. Sometimes you're going to see their cue in an out position to out to in. Sometimes you're going to see their cue in a position of in to out. And then sometimes you'll actually see it to be straight. As a player, I can feel those positions. I know those positions. I know if I'm out to in or in to out or straight or practically straight. I embrace those positions. Whereas before, in the conventional world, I was training to target shoot. But when I got into the world of cut shots, it would work against me. My cue would intersect my vision in a different way, therefore giving me a different look at things. So there goes my mental game, because something doesn't feel right. Something's not right. I'm changing something. So I really like the longer cue for a visual reason, as well as I do for physical reasons. Very quickly, and I don't want to expound on this other than just for a moment or two, that I think everybody can agree that in general, the big time aiming occurs from a standing position. There's a reason for that. You have a good distance between yourself and the cue ball and the object ball is to be able to see things from a proper perspective, without going into a lot of detail. Now, the reverse of that, or the opposite of that, might be an alignment to where your eyes are sort of scrunched in close to the cue ball, and your optimal look at the cue ball object ball relationship has a little distortion to it because your cue ball has a larger appearance. So with a longer cue, let's just take this shot right here for example. With a traditional cue, perhaps you would see this type of approach for this shot. You might see the bridge distance. You might see the bridge on the table right here. But with a longer cue, this position right here is really strong visually, because your viewing of the cue ball object ball mimics more closely that which occurs at ball address. So if I have a shot like this in a game, I don't mind this long bridge distance. This cue gives me this bridge distance. And because I know the center cue ball, then my alignment is comfortable, and I'm just more confident that I can stroke down that line. So I'm not suggesting that anybody go out and buy an extension or go out and get a longer cue. That's not the purpose of this. I'm just sharing knowledge. We're all going to experience knowledge as we move along this journey. So I'm all about sharing here in this video some of my experiences, which may or may not be important to you. So I like the longer cue because I feel like from the visual side of things it gives me a little bit of an edge to be able to bridge a little bit longer. That doesn't mean that I can't see balls accurately up close, because I can. But in this game we're all looking for every edge that we can get. And if that means moving the cue ball a little more precisely to a target area, then that's what you must do, because one shot often makes the difference between winning a match or losing a match. So that's my thoughts on the use of a longer cue. So you have to be ready and willing to take on new things, and sometimes you don't want to jump into new things prematurely. Okay, concerning the original intent and purpose for this video, my friend asked me to present to him in the way of video my strategy for holding the cue, gripping the cue. So I have 3 shots that I'm going to share with you that cover a very wide range of what occurs at the table as far as shots go during a game. The first shot that I'm going to share with you is a finesse shot. A finesse shot would be a shot that has an energy that would send the cue ball from the head string up and down the table and out into the table to a quarter, perhaps even a half. So I automatically see cue ball, object ball relationships as far as the energy output for the cue ball, object ball is a split. So that automatically tells me what the shot is. So how do I handle a finesse shot? What's my grip strategy for handling a finesse shot? It's a full hand grip. It's a full hand grip. One in which my hand hardly opens at all on the backswing. What you might notice is there's a hinging that occurs at my wrist, a slight hinging that allows the cue to come back in a more level type linear fashion. If you look at my cue from the back, you'll see that my hand, it doesn't really open up here. There's a hinging at the wrist. My wrist is slightly outward. It took a while to learn that. I wouldn't advise you to go into that unless you're fully motivated to do so. It can offer rewards. So the motion for a finesse shot is just a little soft flow. It's just a little soft slow. So you're at the set position and a little backswing, and then you just go to your finish. It may be at your chest or maybe a little bit short of your chest. Now, if I shoot this shot right here, if I say the cue ball is going to go to mid-table, then I process this, boom, the cue ball, the object ball energy, the cue ball energy. So I feed that forward into what I do physically, which is gripping the cue with a full hand grip. Bob Fancher termed that phrase, as far as I know, in his book, Pleasures of Small Motions. You feed forward. So when I saw that setup right there, I fed forward the energy of the cue ball, the energy of the object ball, which translates into how I physically hold the cue and how I'm going to stroke the shot. So when I drop down on this shot, there's going to be a full hand grip. The tension is about a 3.5, not quite a 4. Now I hit that one a little softer than I wanted to. I caught the cue ball a little bit more fully than I intended to. But this is essentially the same shot. So that's more like I saw the shot. So that's a finesse shot. Why is it a finesse shot? Because the cue ball, object ball energy split does not total up to be more than a trip down the table, up the table, and back out. It's less than that, so it falls into that finesse category, which tells me how I want to grip my cue, how I want to hold my cue. So on these type shots, my hand doesn't, the front of my hand does not open up. My knuckles will point upward slightly. Now let's look at one more. Let's say I want to cut this ball in the side. Let's say I want to cut this ball in the side, and I'm going to send the cue ball back up to the head string. So that's still a finesse shot. You add the energy up between the object ball, even if you have to imagine how far it goes beyond the pocket. With the cue ball, the energy would be less than the cue ball going down the table, up the table, and back out to here. Still a finesse shot. Let's go into the next category of shots. Stun. Stun is a shot where you're hitting the cue ball at its core, very close to its core. Let me back up just a second. When you're shooting a finesse shot, you can be anywhere on the vertical axis. You can add spin. It's all about the energy. You can shoot a little soft draw shot and it still be a finesse shot. So if I have this shot right here and I want to draw it back a little bit, that's still a finesse shot. So you've got a lot of target area on the cue ball as far as to how you utilize your finesse energy. And the same thing is true with a stun shot, except that your primary idea of stun as far as application is right around the core of the cue ball. Could be you could punch it forward, punch it backwards a little bit, or stun it with a little side spin one way or the other. The idea is you're close to the cue ball. You're feeling the full weight of the cue ball practically. You're punching the ball. With the finesse stroke, it's sort of a flow. You got your set position and a flow to finish. With your stun, it's more of a strike. Your mindset that you want to feed forward into the shot is that of the tip striking the cue ball in such a way that it's like you're punching the nose. It's a punch. It's not a flow. It's a punch. That's the muscle application that you want to muster up as far as feeding forward that shot. So you're doing a strike. If you don't have knowledge of what the difference is between a finesse shot and a punch shot, then how can you feed forward what it is you need to do? Well, you might be shooting a little finesse shot with your hand opening like this. Well, that's introducing too many variables into your stroke in order to effectively shoot a finesse shot. It's overkill. It's not going to get the job done. Same with a punch shot. You don't need some great big stroke to punch the ball. It's just boom. I can send the cue ball up and down the table 4 times with that right there. 4 times. So knowledge is important. A lot of pool players are very strong on the right brain. They feel how to do things. But I work with a lot of players because when they come to me, they want to know the why. They want to plug in the left brain perspective of how things are done so that they can more effectively practice and consequently play. So knowledge is huge. Now, let's look at a stun shot. So I'm just going to stun this out into the middle of the table. So I got a full hand grip. I'm going to strike this ball rather than stroke it. So it's more of a strike. Now, typically when you shoot a stun shot, you're adding some speed. When you're shooting a finesse shot, your idea of a finesse shot is to shoot the cue ball in such a way that the cue ball stays on the table. It rolls along the cloth of the table. Pros don't like to shoot finesse shots with the cue ball rolling along that table. Lots of things that can happen that you don't like when the cue ball's on the table. Now with this stun shot, I'm going to purposefully present myself at the table with an angled cue in such a way that I can send the cue ball off of the table. I'm going to pop the shot. So when I drop down on this shot, I've got a coin in front of the cue ball, a dime. Now I've presented myself in such a way that as I strike this ball, the cue ball leaves the table going over the dime. That's what I plan. You know, there's a lot of pro players that are very knowledgeable about what I'm talking about. They don't spend a lot of time discussing it. There's pro players that buy their cues based on how they can change the angles because of how the cue ball leaves the table on its way to the object ball and at impact with the object ball. One pro player made a comment publicly that he thought the Taiwanese would be at the top end of the heap of players that that specialize in cues that allow for various angles to be achieved by moving the cue ball off of the surface of the table. So there's a lot of intricacies into this game. I have important knowledge to share, and I think sometimes the more knowledge that you have to share, the more likely that you're going to experience an exit when you speak these things in public. So that's fine. I expect it. I've seen it occur. I've seen it occur before. So here's another stun shot. I got the dime out here in front of the ball. See, many of you are sending the cue ball off the table already. You just don't know it. Now I'm calling your attention to it. The more you're aware of, the stronger you can be with your trip to the table. You want to know what you're doing. So I'm going to punch this ball a couple of rails out here into the center of the table. Just a punch shot. I used a little bit of right. I was at or near the core. I wasn't at the core. I was near the core with a little low right. Still a punch shot. So the difference between a punch and a finesse, even though they have the same grip, the finesse is a flow. The punch is a strike. You know, where did I first pick up my information concerning finesse and a firm grip? From Phil Burford, a very strong professional player from England. I didn't pick it up overnight. I worked with it before I was able to apply it to my game. Where did I pick up the knowledge of striking the cue ball as a way of thinking about a stun shot? Well, where I personally picked it up was from Brian Parks, a very strong player from California. He's been here a couple times. So he explained to me that he had an experience, or give and take experience, with a billiard player, and that when they shoot the stun type shots, they're thinking of striking the cue ball rather than, if you will, stroking through the cue ball. So if you have a mindset of going through the core of the cue ball, then you can get unwanted turns on the cue ball concerning spin. So that's not the way you want your muscles to act as it's taking the cue forward. You want it to be a different motion, a strike, as if you're doing a punch. So it's different going this way versus this way. So in order to feed forward properly what your body must do, then you have to understand what you're doing at the table when you're shooting a finesse shot versus a stun shot or punch shot. Now let's look at this last set of shots, which is going to be a hard follow and a hard draw, which will give you the energy of the cue ball going up and down the table. Let's call it 4 links. 4 links. So 3.5 to 4 links, shooting a hard shot. Well, there's going to take a little bit more variable involved in order to get that kind of energy out of the cue ball object ball. So I need to do something which is going to be in the form of opening my hand. I need to get more energy. I need to accelerate that tip through the cue ball. So what I'm going to do that is specific to me, that can be of interest to some of you. It takes work to apply some of these things in your game. I'm going to pre-cock my wrist. I'm going to pre-cock my wrist so that when I bring the cue back, that timing variable is much easier to manage. And then at the finish position, I have the classic air to the palm, knuckles up position, which results in me catching the cue lightly with the back of my hand versus not grabbing it with the front of my hand, which is what amateurs do a lot. If you grab the cue prematurely with the front of your hand before the finish of the stroke is complete, then you're going to wreak havoc upon your stroke. So the pros can finish their stroke catching the cue lightly versus grabbing it and finish. This is maybe a little bit exaggerated, but watch Efren. Air to the palm and knuckles up. So I'm going to shoot a draw shot, at least one, and one follow shot that will do this. So I'm just going to put the object ball here. And I'm going to use the coin again because I'm feeding forward. I'm feeding forward the idea that I want the cue ball to leave the table. I don't want it on the table. I'm not going to line up level in any kind of an attempt to keep the cue ball on the surface of the table. Reminds me of a commentary I heard once that Nick Varner was engaged in. Maybe it was with Ray Hansen. I can't remember for sure, but Nick, I mean, anytime you can pick up a commentary with Nick or Jeremy Jones, you should access it, for sure. These guys are at the top of the heap when it comes to sharing information. But anyway, the question came up to Nick, and I think it was in the form of a question about, you've got a little bit of an elevated cue. And Nick's response was, yeah, I do. I think I'm going to work on that a little bit. So, and I'm just shooting off the hip here. Rather than Nick elaborate on his angling of the cue in such a position that it would look like he's faulty in his elevation, he just agreed, yeah, I'm going to work on that a little bit. Rather than going into all the minutiae of what can occur with an elevated cue. Like I said, I'm shooting off the hip here, but I don't think I'm too far out on a limb. Nick knows what he's doing, for sure. So when I shoot this shot right here, I'm going to present myself in such a way, I'm feeding forward in such a way as to I'm going to put some low right on this and hit this ball with a good medium to hard speed in such a way that the cue ball leaves the table. And hopefully I can come into this rail somewhere about right here. So, I pre-cocked my wrist, and as I come through the ball, I end up in that good position to where I'm catching the cue with the back of my hand. That was my goal on that shot. Now, the same thing would hold true. The same thing would hold true for putting some top on the ball. Just because I'm putting top on the ball doesn't mean that I'm automatically going to assume a level position to where I feel like my cue's 100% level. I'm going to assume an angle on my cue for many of my follow shots where the cue ball is going off the table. That's not to say I won't have some to where I'm level or feel as though I'm aiming up a hill. It's important as a player that you learn how to angle your cue. So this shot is, again, I've got a coin here, so I'm planning on leaving the table here. So I had inside spin on that. So obviously the energy for that shot in conjunction with the object ball is such that the cue ball would go up and down the table in a solo 4.5 times. Easy. So in order to accelerate my tip through the cue ball, this timing right here, this pre-cocking of my wrist, facilitates good timing. Now, when you're talking about timing, you've got an arm that is huge in the discussion of it. So I like to isolate this upper arm so that I'm pivoting at the elbow. The elbow is a hinge joint that just so happens, if you get it in the correct line for the shot, it'll open and close in a straight line. So if you enter into the equation movement of your upper arm, now you have shoulder muscles, chest muscles, and back muscles entered into the shot, when you could get by with only using a tricep bicep. Tricep bicep. The tricep muscles open the arm, the bicep closes. So why use 5 sets of muscles when you can use 2 to get the job done? Do I have specialty shots sometimes where I use my upper arm? Yes, I do. There's occasion or two where I want to do this. Boom. So that really requires timing, because now you've got to add some additional variables in there. But that shot can come in handy on some shots that I won't go into here. That's another video. So I think I've covered everything. And to my friend that is well north of me at this point, I'm sure we'll be getting together at some point in the future, and I can personalize this lesson to you in a much better way than I can do by way of video. But I just wanted to just expand the information here in such a way that I could make it public, and so that all could view rather than just sending it out privately. So thank you very much for your time once again.